evening and welcome to the Northborough School Committee meeting of February 1st. It is 6:32 p.m. and I am calling the meeting to order. Audience sharing. Do you have any audience sharing yet? Nothing yet. All right. We'll catch you at the other end of the meeting. New business, we have principal reports tonight. Is going to be Lana Sear from, do you have a microphone? Or do you want to jump over there? Okay. Do you mind hopping over there? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm reporting out for Michelle Karp tonight, who was originally supposed to be here, so this is a treat for me. So there's lots going on in the Northborough schools, in the elementary and middle schools. So I'm going to start with Lincoln Street. So they gathered as a school community this month to hear the 5th grade band and chorus perform their winter concert. And the 5th grade student council presented to the school community to introduce and encourage students to share suggestions for the school via a school suggestion box. And the student council shared more about their goal of raising money this year to present to the St. Jude's Hospital. They're also this week celebrating Global School Play Day in all their physical education classes. So students have been encouraged to bring their favorite game in from home to play during PE class, and no electronic games allowed. Kindness Week is coming up at the end of the month into early March. So the faculty and staff will participate in various activities that celebrate the Kindness Week. Their student council will host a coin drive for St. Jude's, and that will help purchase books for A Little Spot of Kindness. And they also have 2 SEL events. They have a parent night that's coming up on March 7th, and that's going to be talking about the second step curriculum that Lincoln Street introduced this year. And they also have an SEL day, and they've been doing that for 4 years. This is their 4th year doing it. Planning is still underway, but they plan on sharing more details as it gets closer. Peasley has a lot going on in the classrooms as well. So the Peasley Castle program has coordinated a castle cart. So with this castle cart, they work on their communication goals collectively with support from OT and speech. And so they create various items that they then bring around the school on a cart to sell to students and staff members. So it works on their speech and their OT goals as they go throughout the building, and supports on improving those skills. So they've started that. Teachers and PLCs, professional learning communities, have been focused on working collaboratively on reviewing student data and then using that data to inform their practices and their work with students. Grades K to 5 met during the past week to focus on targeting literacy skills alongside their reading specialist and ELA coordinator Megan Kelty. And for enrichment, the PTO is being thanked for their continued commitment to providing high-quality enrichment programs. The Discovery Museum will visit on February 13th to share the Lights and Lasers program with the 4th graders. They will hold a Show the Love Spirit Day on February 14th, where students are encouraged to wear red, pink, or Friendship Kindness shirts to bring a non-perishable food item for their monthly food drive that supports the Northborough Food Pantry. So lots of great stuff happening at Peasley. Proctor is also busy. The month of February, although feeling a little bit short, is filled for us. From February 6th through the 17th, we're supporting heart health by raising money for the American Heart Association through the Kids Heart Challenge. Students will be jump roping and learning about heart health in their PE classes. We also continue to work with Mrs. Borsini as part of our NEF grant to add to our mindfulness toolboxes by continuing our monthly yoga and mindfulness classes. To date, students have learned strategies such as how to use the Hoberman Spear for mindful breathing and the meditation tubes for calming, and all of these tools are available in their classrooms and in their specials. Staff members continue to build their own professional learning with Andrea Flanagan as part of our grant. So in March, Andrea is going to continue to work with us on mindfulness tools and strategies for both adults and for the classroom and for the students as well. And staff members have already incorporated her tools and strategies into their daily work with students. And just like Peasley, we've also been working collaboratively as a staff to review our literacy data and make instructional plans to meet the needs of students as well this week and next week in our PLCs. Mrs. Hibbert continues to work with classrooms across the school employing various technology tools for students to demonstrate their knowledge. Most recently, Proctor third graders in Mrs. Brunel's class used Scratch to illustrate their knowledge of the 5 Native American tribes in Massachusetts. So that was exciting to watch. And lastly, students and staff were invited to participate in a Super Bowl on February 10th. Students are invited to wear their favorite team colors and bring a canned food item to benefit the Northborough Food Pantry. And very exciting, the 100th day with no snow is hopefully February 9th. And students and staff will celebrate by dressing like we are 100 years old. So Z School on January 18th had a musical bingo night. So the 5th graders sold concessions and families enjoyed a fun night listening to everyone's favorite Disney songs and winning prizes. Over the next 2 weeks, students at Z are collecting items for the Northborough Food Pantry as well. The 5th graders went to each classroom to share about the food drive and also made posters that they hung up around the school advertising. It was a great opportunity for them to show some leadership and also for the school to give back to the Northborough community. On February 9th, Z will welcome Jay Mankita from Playful Engineering. He will help lead the students in designing and creating a Rube Goldberg machine, which uses chain reactions. And each grade will have about 90 minutes to explore, problem solve, and engineer their machines. And then they'll share their creations with each other as part of that event. And lastly, Melican. Michelle would like us to highlight some exciting technology learning that's happening at Melican. So the 8th graders worked on introductory coding projects to build an understanding of algorithms. And throughout the project, students practiced sequencing, looping, and adding conditionals to codes. 7th graders practiced using simulations with virtual reality headsets. They first watched glacier videos on YouTube 360. Next, they used the National Geographic app to kayak in the Antarctic and take pictures of the animals there. And 6th graders have begun using the YouTube 360 with virtual reality headsets as well to explore NASA's virtual reality playlist. 6th graders will continue watching the videos of the International Space Station. Melican Student Council is leading a students versus staff book donation drive over the course of the month of February. All donated books will benefit More Than Words, a nonprofit that helps youth who are in foster care, involved with the courts, and or homeless to take charge of their lives. Basketball will be wrapping up their season on February 15th against Trotter at Algonquin. And so they'd like to thank Trotter and Algonquin for partnering with us. This game at Algonquin is a favorite for many of our student spectators. And the annual student-faculty basketball game takes place on the Friday before vacation. So exciting event there. And they haven't been able to hold this event since February of 2020. So they're really looking forward to bringing that back. And apparently the students want to be ready to avenge the most recent loss to the staff. So we'll see who comes out victorious with that. And then another Melican tradition is participating in Valentines for veterans. All students will have opportunities to create Valentines to be delivered to the Veterans Home on Grove Street in Worcester. And lastly, parent-teacher conferences take place on March 9th. And report cards are also going out this Friday for the elementary schools in Northborough as well.
On Parent Square.
On Parent Square. Yep, we're excited. So those are the updates.
So Alana, just a quick confirmation. So the parent-teacher conference date did change.
It did change.
So what was a half day in the calendar was March 19th?
It was April
19th.
April 6th. So it's now March.
You're close.
So my point is the half day that we were having
Yes.
in April for our parent-teacher conferences is now a half day,
on March 21st.
and we will communicate that out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
and it will be a full day on the one
April
that
6th.
Yes.
the April 6th.
Yes. So those should be adjusted on our calendars to reflect that. Yeah, and information will be going out relatively soon about signing up for conferences. I know we've been working with Rhoda around scheduling for our families as well, so information will be coming out about that.
Great. Anything?
I would just say thank you for that presentation. It was great to hear what's going on in the schools, and really to Proctor for all the mindfulness things that you're doing. We actually met today
Yeah.
as the Wellness Committee and talking about Wellness Week, and that came up a lot as what you guys are already doing all the time.
Greatly enjoyed it, and I think what's been really exciting to watch, and I think just really fascinating, is even our youngest learners, our kindergartners, and our fifth graders, who you think they may not buy into it, and they love it. And I just can't say enough about Mrs. Borsini. She's one of our parents. She, obviously a Northborough resident, and she's been so giving and generous, and really takes the feedback from the students and the staff, and we have a lot of dialogue on how it can be tailored the next month. So this month coming up, we're making breathing bracelets. She's done these in the past with students, and just again continuing to add to the tools where kids can use these in the classroom, but also at home as well. So we're very grateful to NEF and Mrs. Borsini's partnership too.
We might be reaching out to you, right?
Please, yeah, please. Lots to share, lots to share. And really, Andrea Flanagan from the Collaborative is a PT. She's a certified yoga teacher, a certified mindfulness instructor. She's brought a lot to us. And Kristen Wilson, an OT for Proctor and Milliken, were really big parts of this grant as well. And they've been a lot behind the scenes, helping to make the toolboxes and add to the toolboxes, and a lot of dialoguing. So, yeah, please, anybody who'd like to learn more, we're happy to share.
Great, thanks.
I had a question for Kindness Week. Is that something that started last year? And was that in collaboration with the community affairs? Is it still in collaboration with that committee this year?
Yep, and we got a communication from the Community Affairs Committee, so I know we're participating. I reached back out and responded with what we're planning to do when that comes up. So yes, absolutely.
Great. It's great to see it in its second year.
Yeah, they're going to do, I think, the lanterns in the town common again. And
It was a lot of fun last year.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank
Appreciate
you.
your coming tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And don't forget your coffee.
I won't forget my coffee. Never forget the coffee over there.
Next on the agenda is legislative update.
So I have a couple legislative updates this evening. First, there is some legislative advocacy happening through the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents around fully funding circuit breaker reimbursement from 75% to 90%, which would have a significant impact on our overall operational budget. And secondly, really trying to get our congressional delegation to fully fund IDEA, which is special ed law, which again would have a positive impact. And then thirdly, to return to federally funded universal free school meals across our country. I will also share that Healy Driscoll administration did file a $280+ million supplemental bill, and one of the funding from that bill is to fund a shortfall of the appropriation for universal school meals. If the bill doesn't pass, the funding for universal school meals will end in March. There is $65 million in that supplemental budget package to fund universal meals through the remainder of the year. So I did not realize that the appropriation was going to be depleted by March. I was pleased to see that in this supplemental budget bill, it funds the gap that exists.
Wow. So because they made it seem like, that it was for the school year.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Wow.
And then lastly, I think there's some local legislative movement around continuing the universal school meals in Massachusetts, even if the federal universal free meals doesn't move forward.
Okay.
So those are the three areas.
Can I clarify so regardless of what happens this year, free lunch will continue? It just sort of depends on where the money's coming from.
The expectation is that the pilot program, Universal School Meals, will end this June.
Okay.
And that funding for next year has not been identified, but there is advocacy moving forward, and either will be funded at the federal level, the state level, and if not, it will be back on fee for service.
Okay.
Since that's a coalition of schools, sorry.
Nope,
It's okay, fine. Since that's kind of the coalition of mass school or school committees, are there notes of support that we could provide for one or all of those?
They have draft letters that we can, template letters we can complete, the school committee can complete and we can submit.
So I would just say to the chair that, like, if available and consensus reached, it'd be great, I think, if we could get Northborough's support to that.
Did we already do one for like the circuit breaker and stuff like that, or is that
We did,
stuff
but I
that
think
we-
it doesn't hurt to
do it
refresh
again?
those.
Yeah.
And then can I ask one more question? So that I'm just curious about the funding for the universal free meals wasn't planned to reach the end of June, or the participation rates and the drawdown of the funds has brought it to a March?
So the budgeted amount was supposed to be for the full year.
Okay.
They depleted the
Yes.
appropriation faster than they had
Yes.
anticipated. It's food
Okay.
costs of the program.
Inflation things and.
More participation.
The original allocation, I think, was $110 million.
Yeah, but
So-
they had done that based on an assessment of the participation rates for a full calendar year, which included I thought had included both the brown box program, which is the delivery of raw materials or lightly processed materials, and the reimbursement rates in the schools. So it's interesting to hear that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, $65 million
Yeah.
of a shortfall is a large.
It's a large shortfall.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. Moving on, the next agenda item is the MCAS presentation by Dr. Reinhorn.
So just a quick overview. So Dr. Reinhorn has been working closely with principals and the teaching and learning team, looking at our MCAS results and thinking about, how we can use that data to inform change for our students, and also how we can look at our curriculum and resources and make some adjustments and improvements. So this evening, she will present that work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share this. I think we often do it a little bit earlier in the year, but just with our schedule, this is where we are, and it's just interesting because we're starting to prepare for taking the MCAS again. So
I just got the schedule for
yeah,
my kids this year.
exactly. So I'm going to start off, give a little bit of context. Some of it will feel repetitive to those who are familiar with it, but potentially we have audience members who are watching who aren't. In terms of the purpose, the MCAS is intended to support all stakeholders, families, community members, and public, the district, the state, in having clear, actionable information to support decisions. It's used at both a state level, a district level, and a school level to make decisions about resources and where to invest our efforts. A moving screen. For us as a district, I think it's important, as we often do, to start with thinking about Vision 2026 and our big picture mission, vision, core values, and recognize that MCAS is an important metric, but is obviously not comprehensive of everything that we value and that we are committed to. And especially, like, if you look at our profile of a graduate, there are things like collaboration that MCAS doesn't give us evidence about those things. So I think it's important for us to sort of keep this in the context of it being one piece of a very large puzzle. So little reminders. No MCAS in 2020. In 2021, it was modified, so students didn't take all of the sections. And there were also differences in some of the psychometrics of how they calculated student growth percentiles. So the data is not necessarily comparable when we look across, and I'll remind you when we look at some of the specific data. 2022, which is the data we're looking at tonight, we were back to a more typical administration. So all students were taking all sections. We were back to computer-based testing. And our participation rates were at 99% in all three, in ELA, math, and science, which is about typical for us, and a great place to start. I think it's important for us to just think about what is our population, who are our students. In terms of the demographics, overall, we're fairly steady in terms of just the number of students. But when you start to look at race and ethnicity and some of our subgroups, you can see that there are some slight changes that have been happening, in recent years. And so this is showing us, for the subgroups, the last 3 years of data, what percentage of our population are from any particular subgroup. The reason low income has only one bar is that every couple of years the state decides to change their designation, and it was previously economically disadvantaged and has switched to low income, which has a different cutoff, and so they're just not comparing it back to economically disadvantaged. High needs category includes students with disabilities, students who are low income, and students who are English language learners. There are sometimes students who fit more than one of those categories, but that is what high needs refers to. This is probably familiar to people who receive their own students' scores. So this just reminds us that there are 4 categories or 4 achievement levels in the way we talk about the students' scores, whether we're talking about an individual student or whether we're talking in aggregate or for subgroups. So we have exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and not meeting expectations. So we'll use those categories as we go through. So first we're going to take a look at English language arts. Okay, so what we're looking at here is grades 3 through 8 aggregated. So it's all of the grades together. And what you have on the right side of the screen are looking at what percentage of the students were in each achievement level category for each year. So you have a 2017 bar, 18, 19, 21, and 22. Again, we didn't have it in 2020. And you can see the code for, at the top, we have the exceeding, the sort of middle blue is meeting, and then we have partially meeting and not meeting. On the far right, there's a single bar for the state in 2022 as a reference point. On the far left, you can see often we talk about proficiency, which is essentially saying what percentage of students are either meeting or exceeding expectations. So that shows us the last 5 years for us versus the state. Again, we have to be careful about comparing to 2021, but I think part of the story as we continue to look at the data is that we can see where, when we look in the aggregate, there is some dip in our scores during the pandemic, which we would expect, and there's starting to be some rebound in the scores, and in some places we see more and less, and for some groups we see more and less. So this is achievement. So this is the levels of achievement. Another way to look at the performance is to think about growth. So achievement, is what level are you at this moment in time, whereas student growth percentile is a measure of progress that a student has made. And so the way I like to think about it is, for any one student, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, let's look backwards to other students who had like scores last year. So that cohort of students, that group of students who did similarly last year, and then they're looking at the percentile of growth. So compared to those other kids who were in a similar place last year, were you about average, so about 50th percentile in terms of how much you grew? Or did you grow a lot more than most of the kids in that group, and you might be at the 75th or at the 90th percentile for growth? Or, for whatever reason, did your growth stagnate, and maybe there was very little growth and you're in a low percentile? So that's what student growth percentile is trying to do, is show the relative growth compared to students who had a similar previous testing profile, previous testing score. It's not necessarily from the same subgroup or anything like that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a graphic that shows us, again, ELA, grades 3 through 8, and it's showing us growth and achievement in the same graphic in the aggregate. So the star represents the state. So where the state in grades 3 through 8 ELA had 49.8 as their mean student growth percentile, so sort of right in that middle average, their achievement, the percent of students who were either meeting or exceeding, was at 41%. Northborough is represented by the green circle, 48 for our mean student growth percentile, and 53% of our students were meeting or exceeding. So this is kind of a big picture. So continuing to look at the growth picture, again, being really cautious that what you have each grade, and then you have the aggregate 3 through 8 at the bottom. And then you have 2019, 2021, 2022. We don't have growth percentiles for third grade because they don't have a cohort to compare back to. In 21, we don't have it for fourth grade because they didn't take it in third grade. So we have nothing to compare back to. But we have to be very cautious about not comparing to 21. It was a completely different formula for how they calculated growth percentile because they didn't think that it would be statistically accurate to try to use the usual formula. But I do think that it's some of the same story of that there was a dip and we are seeing where we are getting back, and in some cases exceeding, and in some cases not quite all the way back to the same levels of growth that we were at before. The other thing to be really careful about, and I should have said this when we were looking at achievement, is when you look at 1 year compared to the year before. So example, if you're looking at 5th grade and you're looking at, wow, we had an average or a mean growth percentile of 44, but in 2019 we had 49.3, we have to remember those are different kids. We're not comparing, right? Those kids in 2019 who were 5th graders are 7th graders by the time. So that's an important piece of how we think about the data as well. So another thing that we look at is start breaking it down even more and looking at disaggregated data, so looking at subgroups. And we can, again, do that by growth, and we can do that by achievement, and then we can also dig into any of these categories. I think part of the story that we see as we look at both the growth and achievement is that not everybody was affected the same way by the pandemic, right? Some groups were more affected than others. Some were in remote learning longer than others, and no group is monolithic, right? There are differences within groups as well. The other thing I feel like we should be cautious about when we look at disaggregated data is that in the far right column, you have the number included. So when you're looking at a subgroup that has 317 kids versus a subgroup that has 29 kids, those percentages, just a couple of kids of those 29 landing in a different place above or below proficiency can change that percentage a lot. Whereas with the 317, a change in the percentage represents, a lot of less movement. So that's something else to be cautious about. If the subgroup is too small, then there's no data represented. So one of the things that's, I think, also interesting for us to notice about, I'm kind of going slowly through the ELA, and then we'll probably be able to go a little faster through the math, but as we sort of go between looking at achievement disaggregated and growth, I just went backwards. One of the things that you notice is that there's not major discrepancies in 2022 in our growth percentiles from one subgroup to the next. There are much bigger, this is now achievement, so this is the percent of students that are meeting or exceeding, and you see much bigger gaps when we look at it as a picture about achievement. And this is not unique to us. Like, I think this is what you would see in almost any district. And the challenge there is that is great that we have, relatively similar growth for all of our subgroups of students. The problem is you can't close gaps. You're maintaining the gaps. And so our challenge is to get even higher rates of growth for the students who need it the most. So in math, I'm going to take us through the same data. I think part of the interesting story in math is that the state overall felt the pandemic more in math than in ELA, but that was not actually what we saw in our district, which I think was interesting. But similarly, if we look at as we go through the data, I think you'll see a similar sort of, we've rebounded in some areas we still have some place to go. So, let's see. Yeah, and I think that's, with achievement you can really see, but again, it's hard to, because you have 2021 in there that you don't want to compare to, but you can see that bottom half stands out compared to the other years, and then we're kind of coming back to, more of where the other years are. Right, so again, this is our math, grades 3 through 8 aggregated. We have, the green circle represents us, it represents Northborough as a district, and I always want to make sure I say this correctly, so we are at 57.9% are meeting or exceeding, so that's our achievement, and 54.7 is our mean growth percentile. So our growth is a little bit higher and our achievement is a little bit higher than in ELA, although that they're different tests, and so it's not necessarily a fair thing to compare. In terms of our growth percentiles, again, in some grade levels, if we look at 22 to 2019, our growth percentiles are higher than they were in 2019. In some places we're not quite all the way back to where we were, but we've definitely seen kind of a rebound in a lot of those areas. And then it's similar to what I was just explaining with the ELA, in that when we look at the growth disaggregated, not only do we not have a huge gap the way we might in the achievement, but actually some of our subgroups that might be lower in achievement are higher in growth, right? So look, if we look at our L's and former L's, their growth percentile here is 53.2, which is is above some of our other subgroups. And then when we look at achievement, again, we have bigger gaps that we are still always aware of and working on. Science, technology, and engineering is interesting to look at. We only take this test in 5th grade and in 8th grade, and one of the things to be aware of is 5th grade is cumulative of all of the science that's taught throughout elementary school. So it's not just what you did in 5th grade science, it's taking concepts from all of the years, which is true in middle school as well. So this first graphic, we again have multiple years of data. We have it compared to the state and looking at levels of proficiency. This has 5th and 8th grade together. I think it's more telling when we break it apart. And it's not entirely surprising that it's going to probably take us longer to bounce back in this, because you have your 5th graders of 22, you're potentially having, you had the teachers who were teaching all subjects during the pandemic. Science was potentially one of the things that might have been, when we were sort of pushing certain power standards, might have gotten less time in a hybrid mode. And now you're sort of filling the gaps of multiple years that are going to show up in this testing data. Whereas during the pandemic, we did not see as much of a slide in middle school science. The teachers who were teaching science in middle school, that is the only subject they're teaching. And so the kids were still probably getting more consistently all of the standards in science throughout the pandemic. So there's probably just a little bit longer timeline on filling those pieces in. And then we also have the disaggregated data both in achievement and we don't have growth, sorry, for science and technology because there is no previous year to compare back to. So I wanted to just take a couple minutes to show, we can look at all of this data, and as I said at the beginning, this is one piece of a really big puzzle, and we do dig into it and really take it seriously, and we have many other types of data that we bring it together with. But I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how teachers and schools actually look at this data beyond what we just did. So one of the things that schools do is we want to get closer to the data and say, how might we use this to inform our instruction? So they will often conduct item analyses where they're actually looking at specific items and saying, what are the implications? They will look at the disaggregated data, but at the level of a school, they can get to the level of which kids are in which subgroups and what does this tell us about them. They will analyze individual results. I was talking to a principal who was saying those results for that student don't match up with what we're seeing on a daily basis. What's going on here? And that growth percentile is much lower than we would have expected, and so we can get to that level. Identifying students who are sometimes scoring higher than we expect and saying, how are we going to accelerate this student? What are possibly non-academic needs that we need to, or barriers that we need to support? And then looking at other assessments. This is one assessment that has lots of limitations in terms of what it can tell us. So just to give you a quick glimpse of what we mean when we say we do item analyses, there's a lot of different ways and tools the teachers and schools can use to look at an item analysis. This is a snapshot of the ELA test. I'm trying to remember what grade I pulled, but this is the ELA test, and what you can see is that there are 31 items across the top, and then it shows you for each one the question type. the reporting category, and they're hyperlinked, and then it shows you the standards that this question is testing. And so if you click on the hyperlink, and this is what our teachers sit down and do, and our principals, they can actually see the question, and they can even do the question. So they can go to the question, they know what standards it's addressing, what type of question it was, they can see it, they can see what the right answers were. They can then also look at it relative to the state, relative to the district, and say, why on this question, did we do so much worse than the rest of the district, or so much better than the rest of the district, or you can look at a class.
So you're saying these are the actual questions from the test that the kids are taking?
Yes, although there are some questions that aren't released every year.
Okay.
There are some questions that get held back and you can't actually see the questions.
Okay.
But the ones that are released, you can actually see the questions. So they can look at it, there's graphical representations, there's tables, and they literally, this picture is a picture of the Millikan teachers in here, and they were looking at item analyses, and they were digging into the data and going through it, and then they pull, what they might do is this is one of our teachers' view of their class. And what you see here is the items are across the top, and they know the number of points possible from what we were just looking at, and they can look right down and say, wow, look at number 17. There are a lot more zeros in that particular question than I would expect, and then some of the other questions. Let's click on number 17 and see what that problem is. Let's look at what the standards were. And then they can say, why do we think kids got this wrong? What does this tell us? Is there a pattern here? Are we seeing, particular one is about drawing inferences. Are we seeing that there is something that we need to do differently in the way that we're teaching that? So that's an example of kind of item analysis work, and it's one of the ways that our teachers dig into the results at the level of classes, at the level of grade levels, and use the actual data. And then I'll just bring us back to our big picture and say again that this is only one of the sources of data that we use of many, and we're always sort of triangulating and thinking about the big picture of what our vision is and where we're trying to take the kids. And MCAS is one tool that helps us to pursue that. So I'm happy to answer questions. And
thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it. It's very thorough. It's got everything in it. So great. I'll start down at the end of the table.
A lot of questions. I'll try and pick one or two and then.
Okay.
So I guess one is understanding that there was a pretty significant loss in time for learning and a change in the way learning was distributed to children. How much should we weigh this year's? Right, like for parents, right? Like, I mean, we're still not 6 months away, a year away. I mean, this time last year we were still very much in COVID.
Yep.
And so I guess I'm asking a professional opinion.
Yeah.
Just so that other parents can hear it said out loud, because as a parent, I don't have a child taking an MCAS. How much weight should I apply to a set of results given how close we are still removed from this massive event?
And this assessment was given in 22, so we're talking about it now, but this was,
March of 22.
Yeah, so
Or I guess maybe not how much weight you should put on it, because that maybe is.
How do you make sense of it
How do you
in
make
that
sense of it?
context?
Yeah, like how as a parent are you going to make sense of growth or regression?
So I would say a few things, and Greg may have some thoughts. As we looked at this data, one of the things we said is, like, we wish we could see next year's results
Totally.
now,
Yeah.
right? This is a journey.
Yeah.
And I would caution people that the pandemic had different effects on different people, but where it did maybe decrease opportunities for some students, it's going to be a slow climb back in some cases.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it did it for all of us, right? And there are some places where everybody had a loss of learning time, and so everybody is on that journey together. I would advise parents that, again, it is one piece of data, and talk to the teachers. Ask them how they make sense of your child's data in the context of everything else they know. They have a lot of other inputs that they can bring to that conversation, but I wouldn't overemphasize it.
Okay.
That would be my.
I think the thing is, too, that's with the MCAS that's kind of crazy, is that you have it in the spring, but you don't get the results until the fall.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, so
Too late to do anything.
it's like, are you really going to talk to your
It's
teachers?
the hard
from
part
the-
about these large data captures
Yes,
is, like, by the time they're done processing, it's it's like post-reactive. It's
Yeah, it's
not
like,
even
how
reactive.
do you
It's-
talk to the teacher from last year and say, well, what are you going to do to break
Yeah,
it
I
down?
think-
Oh, wait, nothing,
I'll
because
just
it's,
make
it's like.
a couple comments to add to your.
I do have a second question.
Sure, I'll be quick. So first, we make sure that the data is with next year's teacher.
Okay.
Yes.
The teacher and the students, they have that information so they can inform instruction beginning as soon as possible, day one. And then secondly, I would just comment that, as parents, we need to keep the end in mind. We need to think about the goal, the portrait of the graduate. MCAS really is kind of a floor. It's not the ceiling for our
Totally.
students. So we have high school students. This is a pretty low bar for meeting expectations, and our students do very well when they graduate from high school and go on to college. MCAS is not a barrier for them. So I think keeping the end in mind, our students do very well at Algonquin on MCAS and have continued through the pandemic. And students are resilient, and time is really important. Students will, over time, make up for any learning loss that they may have experienced.
And I would say that, to your point, Kelly, we see patterns over time. So I was talking with Kathy Lazat, our math coordinator, about a pattern around a particular group of standards that over several years we've seen we tend to be a little bit weaker on. And we've been looking at the resources and we've been saying, okay, in terms of curriculum resources, what are we doing to supplement what we already had there? So for us, it's often a tool at scale to see some of these patterns.
I think that's all great advice and great kind of framing for parents. My second question is, this is just kind of like, acknowledging that there are both ends of the spectrum here, right? And we talk about kind of really closing the gap. Like, that's just a phrase that I hear used a lot. For students who were able to continue to excel, how are we making sure that there are still further opportunities for them to grow? Not exclusive or outside of the need to bring others up, but I guess I'm asking for just a quick, there are still opportunities for high performers to continue to grow and be challenged in the dynamic while other students are getting the necessary resources to come up further than they currently are.
Yeah, so a couple of quick thoughts on that. One is just that we are always working together with our teachers on how we are providing differentiated opportunities within the classroom, and like our math coordinator, I'll use Kathy as an example again, will talk about low floor, high ceiling tasks, and working with teachers on like something that's going to have an entry point for everyone, but can be stretched to a higher level of complexity for others. So that's one approach. Another thing, I'll continue with math, as that's what's on my in the brain right this minute. Like we've been in and out of classrooms, and we have a program called ST Math that we've been using at the elementary level. That's a spatial conceptual math program, and it actually, again, is kind of this low floor, high ceiling experience where there's no language, there's no directions, so all of our students can access this program. But when we walk into classrooms, it also is adaptive and moves with the kids. I have been in classrooms where side by side there are kids in the program working, you know, many months apart in terms of what they are conceptually tackling. There might be a student that's working on, like, you know, literally like counting side by side with a student who's doing something with symbolic representation of, you know, subtraction problems, and they're right next to each other. So we're constantly trying to find the resources that support the teachers, because that's a lot to juggle, to have that stretch and that support. So we're always looking for those resources to support those experiences.
So I'll just add another frame. So when we think about you know, learning, so we have 4 questions that we ask, and teachers use as a frame, you know, what do we want students to be able to know and do? What learning experiences do we want students to have in order to accomplish the learning? What if they already know, you know, the knowledge and skills that we're trying to teach? What do they need next? And then what are those learning experiences for students who already know that information? How do we accelerate their learning? So that's a frame, 4 questions that we have all teachers ask and we ask ourselves, because it's not just around closing the gap. It's also making sure that all students are getting what they need.
Thank you very much.
I think my only question is on our packet here, the last slide is implications. These 6 bullets, are these goals? Are these things we're already doing?
So those, I think I hid that then when I was presenting.
Sorry.
So those, that's okay. So those are talking about sort of the
universal
screeners.
screeners.
Yes.
Math tutoring.
Yeah, so those are things that we are doing, and really looking at, so in ELA, I'm like looking, so in ELA and math, and this is really to Bryce's question, like trying to have consistent data points beyond MCAS that we are using in all of our elementary classrooms, and in ELA we have consistent data points that we're using in the middle school as well, so that we have good information about exactly where everyone is. And so that's part of the screener work. And then having the tiered levels of intervention, which is, you know, then meeting each student where they are and giving them what they need. The math tutoring is our Title I tutoring program, which I think I mentioned is in the day now. So in the past, that has sometimes been an after-school opportunity or a before-school opportunity, and this year it is in the school day. And we're focusing in on certain grade levels at each building, depending on the needs of the kids.
So that's being offered at all 5 schools?
That is at all 5 schools in Northborough, yep. And then the SEL screener and framework, we've talked about that at other times. And the teaching and learning team is just, you know, the fact that we now meet regularly as a teaching and learning team and have really built out that team at the central leadership to have that coherence and coordination across disciplines around all of these things.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, sorry.
That's okay. No, there's a lot. This like takes us in a lot of
When
directions.
we talk about the budget and I present the budget, we'll also talk about curriculum and the purchasing of curriculum as a result of the analysis of our data, you know, looking at making sure we have the most up-to-date curriculum resources and tools for teachers to use. So the work around ELA and mathematics are 2 examples that the teaching and learning team are moving forward. And some of that work moving forward is indirectly as a result of analyzing the data over a period of time.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I would say the one question I have is about our English learner students and our former English learner students. Those achievement numbers, there was a substantial difference in 2020, 2019? What were the 2 years we're comparing? 2019 and 21.
Oh, well, 20, we have 21 also.
Okay, right.
But we were just,
Right, okay.
So 19, 21, and 22 is what.
Okay. So,
math, both?
yeah, both of them, yeah, I guess, what's our game plan? That's probably more of a Rhoda question, but obviously there are some learning gaps there for our L students. So,
Could I just make a comment
Yes.
too? I think it's important to remember when we think about the pandemic that, Rhoda and Lori Allen prioritize our Ls and our students who receive student support services. So they were in our schools 4 days a week versus the cohort modeling every other day. So they had a less disrupted experience in terms of academics. So I think it's just important to highlight. I think it's just context.
that's important.
To talk
Yeah.
about. And I think also, not only did the pandemic impact what was happening in our schools and the way we delivered education, but also how it impacted families, what they experience in the home, students' kind of social emotional well-being. So that is a factor in terms of some of the data that we're seeing. But Rhoda, I'll turn it over to you.
No, and it's really, the nice thing is that we're all talking about it, so it's not limited to, one department, the concern of one, but that it's in all of our meetings of how we're meeting the needs of our different students. And therefore, the conversation of resources and everything that we bring in, is it going to help address the needs of our English learners with disabilities? So the nice thing is that we work coherently to be able to address the needs of all of them, realizing that some of our students need more and need different to be able to grow the way that they need to grow and close those gaps.
Are you seeing any, and I know MCAS is just one set of data, correct? So, it's just one set of data, but I'm curious if in using, is it the Elevation tool you're using this year to collect data from teachers about achievement in classrooms for L students, or is that FEL students? So I'm just curious if sort of what teachers are seeing in their classrooms sort of lines up with the MCAS data, or whether sort of like what Stephanie was talking about, the stories are different in the classroom.
I think we need to look at the stories in the classroom, because we need to remember that MCAS is designed for monolingual English speakers. It's not being designed for students who are learning English. And therefore, what is more important is to see the outcome. If the students are with us through high school, where are they? Ultimately, it's a grade 10 MCAS. Right now, it's important for us to see, how they go performing and if there's growth. But that's not a true measure for our English learners at this time. And that's very important for us to remember.
And I would just add that I think Rhoda's original point about this sort of integrated approach is really important. Like, we were part of some conversations recently with, they were looking at the ELA screeners and the ELA assessments that are done, and you had the reading teachers and the ELD teachers, and looking at, so what aspect does the ELD teacher support in terms of language development, and in what cases is the reading teacher also another source of support, and how do those different supports come together? So it really is sort of a shared effort, and as we look at curriculum resources, the ELD teachers and Rhoda and then student support services are all at the table. So that's like this ST math I was talking about, we were so excited about, because our L students have exactly the same access to that program as any other student, no matter what level their English is, because there's no language on the screen.
Right.
So those are the kind of things we're considering.
What languages are available to students?
Next presentation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next.
That is a good segue, yeah.
I'll just make one comment too, and I think if you look at the number, sorry, 2022.
you want it back up?
So we had
Coming back.
79 L's.
Right.
We can't make the assumption that that is exactly the same students in 2019. So one of the things we will do is we will look at the students who were with us in 2019 and were L's and how that cohort performed in 2022, because we did welcome new L's.
Right.
And depending on what level of language acquisition they're
That's
working
right.
on, it can vary greatly. So I think that is a great point and something that we can look more closely at, because I think it might tell a different story.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's what I was going to say too, is that not only are we, it's almost like the whole steps and ladders type thing, you know? It's like you're really not comparing grade 3 to 3, you're doing 3 to 4,
right.
you know, and that's how it should be. And especially with English learners, I mean, they might graduate out by the time, so the ones the next year that they're testing out, they're not even the same kids, not the same group or anything. So, you know, and who knows where their level is at that testing point compared to where the group for the prior year was. So, yeah, it's very,
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting for all grade levels and everything.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And Lauren just gave us a great segue for our next.
She did.
Our next topic on the agenda is the multilingual learner presentation by Rhoda Webb.
Perfect segue.
It's almost as if we planned it that way.
It worked really. So thank you for the opportunity to present this evening about our multilingual learners. There is a lot of legislation that we need to implement in our district. I will not go through it, but they're both federal and state regulations that we need to abide by. The two Massachusetts Blueprint for L Success and the L Data Dashboard are on our DESE website, and it's full of very important information and good information about our multilingual learners. And you'll see throughout the presentation that we are addressing in our strategic plan empowering learners, equity of opportunity, and healthy and balanced learners as well. So multilingual learner or English learner, this is a state definition, which is very simplistic, but an English learner is a student whose first language is not English and who is currently not able to perform ordinary classroom work in English. It is a lot more involved in this when you're actually working and looking at the growth in a language. You will notice that we're using the term multilingual learner more than English learner because it shows an asset that the student has, not that the student has no language and all of a sudden they're learning English. So it's used interchangeably. The Department of Education is also using multilingual learner. So this is the story. We get to know our students. It's very important that we get to know each student individually and their family. And it all starts with a home language survey. Every family who joins a district fills out a home language survey. There are questions about the uses of languages in the home and with the child. If a language in addition to English or other than English is listed, one of the regulations is to ensure that the child has enough proficiency of English to be able to access what is going on in the classroom. So that is our starting point. If another language is mentioned, our English language development teachers meet with each family. We ask the families, because they know their child the best, how they use the languages in their home, how they use it in their community with grandparents and families, friends, and that way we're making no assumptions. We are required to implement a language proficiency screening in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and those are the names of two screeners. One's for preschool and the other is from kindergarten through grade 12. According to the results of the screener, we can determine the language proficiency level of a child, and the child would either qualify as an English learner in the program or not. If the child qualifies to be able to receive English language development, therefore to enrich the level of English, the parent will receive a placement letter letting them know that and letting them know the score, and those placement letters are also translated when needed. Families usually know that this letter is coming. It's not a surprise because we're in communication with the families. That process can take anywhere from an hour to 2 to 3 hours from our English language development teachers. And to give you an example, let me go back to that. Our English language development team, we took a look at 130 students this fall who were tested, and out of there, over a quarter of the students did qualify into the program. And so that is important information for you to know the amount of work that goes behind the scenes. Now we'll take a look at district trends, and we'll look at our population analysis, the race of ethnicity of our multilingual learners, home languages, and the proficiency levels analysis and our staffing. And those are photos of middle school students here at Millikan. So to understand this graph, and this was frozen in December because I was going to present in January. So we started counting English learners back in 2004, 2005. So the dark blue bar, we had 32 multilingual learners. And if we go all the way to this year, to the right of the graph, you see the dark purple is 96. However, in January, we received 7 new students, so we're at a total of 103 students at this time. And the light purple graph are the students we have reclassified. So those are 66 students. This year, we reclassified 20. So the numbers are never static, so they're not the same 55 former English learners of last year. We reclassified 20 more, and those are within the 66. Since we need to monitor those students for 4 years, we're looking at a total of 169 students, both English learners and former English learners. Last year, our English learners comprised 5.2 of all Northborough students, and at this time, as of today, we're at 6.4 of the total population. Race and ethnicity of our multilingual learners, we'll look at 2022, and you will see that it's a majority Hispanic, followed by Asian, white, and African American. This is only multilingual learners, not the former English learners. If we look at languages and cultures are very tied together. You cannot separate a language from its culture, and we are really enriched in our schools and in our classrooms for having this amount of diversity of languages. So you can see that the majority languages are Portuguese, Spanish, and Arabic, followed by Chinese and Russian. So those numbers, although they've slightly changed, have maintained as our majority languages. This also, by law, if a family requires translation of interpretation, we do interpret for meetings, parent-teacher conferences, and also translate documents, as all our families need to have access to their children's education. In Northborough, we interpret for 82 students, the families of 82 students, in Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, and Ukrainian, and we translate for a total of 90, the families of 92 students, the families that I've already mentioned, in addition to Japanese, Korean, and Persian. And I'd like to commend the work of Deb Young, who's the multilingual learner specialist, as she coordinates all interpreters and translators for both regular education and special education. We prioritize that the families, especially when we need to give language access into the schools, that they are attending our parent-teacher conferences and are fully aware of their child's education. So that is something that as a district, I think we do, as a team, work very nice job with. Language proficiency, learning a language is always fluid. So this was frozen in a point of time, and I'm going to give you an update. If you look at entering, that is a student who comes probably not speaking any English at all, or at the word level or phrase level, all the way to bridging, which is a student that we're looking at reclassifying from the program that is speaking in complex compound sentences, for example, and writing at that level as well. Usually the last domain to reach proficiency is writing. That takes longer than speaking, for example, and listening, and we're very aware of that. So the percentages at the foundational level, which would go from not knowing any English to low developing, which would be at the simple sentence level, we're at about, adding the new students that we have now at 42%, those students require more explicit instruction of English language development. And at the transitional level at a 58%. The students at the transitional level, for example, expanding, those are the students that we're going to be analyzing their data to see, once they meet the criteria established by DESE, that we are able to reclassify the students for the following year. So as we work with our multilingual learners, we're very aware of, we know each student's strengths and areas of growth. But if we want to look at general profiles, we've got students who are newcomers, which is usually the first 6 months to 12 months that they're in the country. We have English learners with disabilities. We have students who take longer to be able to be reclassified out of the program, and that can be due to many different factors. Long-term English learners usually are children who probably have not fully acquired language in their home language to the full extent, and then have added another language. So it's much better to have proficiency in the first level, no matter the age, when a second language is learned. We've got students with limited or interrupted form of schooling. It could be due to COVID, and we do have many students in that situation, or coming from other parts of the country or the world where they have had interrupted schooling. And then, of course, we've got our former English learners, the students who we have reclassified. Oh, I'd like to mention that is a student who is sharing a math game, a Korean math game. So that's bringing their assets into the classroom and teaching their peers. The program model that we have in our district is called SEI, or Sheltered English Immersion, which has two parts to it. Sheltered content instruction is what happens in the classroom. Classroom teachers, subject teachers, special education teachers, and early childhood teachers all have an endorsement in which they are have been trained to work with English learners, but from a level 3 or developing up, not with the newcomers. That's the level 1s or 2s. And the second part to that, and the arrows show that there has to be collaboration, which there is that the English learners or multilingual learners have to receive English language development, also known as English as a second language, taught by ESL licensed teachers in a systematic way. We have to have curriculum, and we do have our ESL curriculum. And that is done in alignment with what is taught in the classroom, and I'll show you in a moment what it is that we address when the students are receiving English language development instruction. I do want to highlight our team of educators ELD teachers who are highly skilled and become the lifeline of a lot of our students and their families, especially when they move to another country and everything's new. How we do school, how to navigate everyday life here, what are the resources, and they do an excellent job in working with our families, getting to know them and communicating then all that information to the whole school community that works with the children. When I mentioned curriculum, we need to follow the new WIDA standards, the 2020 standards, and those are the big ideas as part of the standards, but we're also looking at the curriculum frameworks and the SEL framework as well. This is a photo of the third grade students at Proctor, the unit on autobiography. They wrote their own autobiographies and sent it to Henry Winkler, and Henry Winkler wrote back telling them that he had been inspired by their life and their journeys, so they were very proud when they received a note back from them. So what happens when children receive English language development? This is a unit that actually takes place in our classrooms, and it's water for everyone. In the classroom, students will learn about landforms and bodies of water. They will observe how water and wind can move and change, so erosion. They investigate ways to slow down or prevent changes in the landscape caused by water. Our unit will address the language that the students will need in order to read and write and talk about the content in the classroom. So one of the key uses is going to be the language of explaining. What language is needed in order to explain something. They'll also address the academic language, but also the everyday language that a child might not know a term in English for. We also introduce the structures of cause and effect, the language that goes with cause and effect, and adverbial phrases. This is a snapshot of what is in the unit that goes along with what happens in the classroom. And we also infuse cell competencies. So part of this is addressing curiosity and open-mindedness, planning and organizational skills, and critical thinking skills. So those are embedded in our units. And that's a product of what the students presented, and they were able to explain what they had learned, applying the language that they had been learning. This ties into what you were asking before about accountability. So our students receive report cards. They receive English language development progress reports, and that addresses their listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It is measured by a summative assessment, a yearly access test, which the window is still open. It is happening right now. That is a measure that is designed for students who are learning English, because it's not did they meet expectations or not, but I'll show you in a few minutes how we know where the language proficiency is. Again, it's a one-time point of reference, and of course MCAS, which we addressed before. The access window opened on January 6th. It is closing very soon, February 10th. We will get an overall report, a school report, and an individual report of each student. We will get the reports in June, and the parents we will send it home to families and start analyzing the data. Last year, we had 84 English learners take the test. This year, it'll be more. It'll be 103. And the progress made overall by students was very good. We're at a 68% in progress. Those are photos of students learning grammar, learning vocabulary, using the BPOP. So we're also infusing technology into our units. Every family receives this report. It is one page. It is also translated for families. And you will see that the top part will give the score for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and then their composite scores. And below there's an explanation of every language proficiency level. So in January, this is a snapshot of when the child tested of their language proficiency in the different domains. That's why this is more appropriate to look at, and how our students grow from year to year than how they're doing on MCAS in 3rd grade, for example. I have done an analysis before, and really for students to score high on MCAS, they need to be at the bridging level, at the very end levels of when we are already reclassifying the students, for them to score at high levels on MCAS. So what happens after the access reports? They go home to the families, the individuals. We look at criteria established by the state. If a student receives an overall score of 4.2 on access and a 3.9 on literacy, we're looking at other relevant data to triangulate. What are the scores that they're getting within the classroom in reading and writing? We consult with classroom teachers. Sometimes we're also looking at MCAS, but MCAS is not a deciding factor. And if we're triangulating the data and the student can be reclassified, we're letting the families know. Those letters go home. They go home translated when needed. And then we're monitoring each student for 4 years. So highlights of the program, definitely a family-school partnership. We do not make assumptions about any student that is in our schools. We get to know them personally, get to know their families as well. We've got ongoing professional development. We have new resources which are very timely because they're much more appropriate for our students. We're rewriting our units in grades 1 through 8. I already reported about our summer program to enrich children's language and experiences. And at Melican, we also have an after-school program. All that is funded out of Title III, which is a grant that can be used exclusively for English learners and former English learners. You mentioned Elevation, and that is a student management system in which we're housing all the results of students. When we know the results of all students that come to us and we've taken a look at, with the screeners, with access, we've got 3 years of data in there, their MCAS scores as well, and the monitoring results are also there, which we're also, so we're very excited to have that platform now. Language access with our team of interpreters and translators and the work we do throughout. Everybody has access to the child's education. The LPAC, that's the English Language Parent Advisory Council, is forming this year, which is very exciting. The collaboration that I think I'd really like to highlight in all departments, no matter whom, at central office, the principals, Mary Ellen Duggan and all the team of nurses taking care of our families and our students, with student support services and Marie and the team. We're all working very closely together for the benefit of our students. And then the Culture Through Music is a collaboration with a coalition that we're having again this year, and we're bringing back International Night. Since we can say, I think safely we can gather, I've already consulted with Mary Ellen Duggan. So we'll be able to start. Most of our families, we thrive on being together and to be able to spend time together. So when we have a date, we will definitely let you all know so that you can please come and join us. So thank you very much. This is again from our summer program when our students were analyzing their footprints, being detectives, and thank you for your continued support.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
It's always a pleasure hearing about all this stuff. I have some questions, but I'm going to toss it down to the end of the table first, and I'll...
You starting it down here?
Yeah.
No questions, just comments. First, just thank you. All of this work really digs deep into making Northborough and its school system a really enriching place for folks who are coming here, without other prerequisites such as English. Like, it just shows that the work the district is doing and the team that you've got here is focused on creating a lot of inclusive environments. And then I just absolutely friggin' love changing English learner to multilingual learner. Like I just that slight language change, and the reframing of it. I've used that several times tonight, to an asset. Right, that is an asset that our district now has, that someone else is bringing to us and providing us an opportunity to learn outside of our boxes as well. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had one quick question. On the slide with like the yellow bars at the bottom, it talks about minimum hours per week.
Yes.
Is that hours they're pulled out of the classroom to work in one-on-one setting, group settings?
Yeah, so it's usually small group setting, but that can be in the ELD classroom or within the classroom.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
As long as we are providing the instruction. So we have to be very mindful. The department just look very carefully as are the children getting exactly what they need.
Okay. So these foundational ones are getting 7.5 hours a week?
Yes.
Great.
Not always. It depends on the children and their need. Yes.
So thank you. I think that definitely cleared up a lot of questions that I had and helped answer some of those questions. One thing that I know we've been talking about is how we have more learners with different language, or coming in with different languages. So I think this was helpful data to just see how many languages are spoken, because I know during our budget conversations we've talked about our needs for tutors.
Yes.
Not tutors, I'm sorry, translators.
Translation.
I am curious for our ELF students who are at those like 1 and 2 level BETA scores, are they able to access MCAS in their native language, or are they able to access it only in English?
Only in English.
Only in English, okay. So that helps me to understand the data that we saw from Stephanie's presentation.
Yes.
Because then it's really an English test, it's not a content test.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So 2 questions. One of them is back on one of the earliest slides, and it was the language proficiency screening.
Yes.
And the preschool screener.
Yes.
So for the preschool screener, our preschool is tuition based. So if somebody qualifies for it, is that almost like a special ed thing? Like, is there tuition waivers or anything like that, or is it still? Do they pay full tuition?
Because it's part of regular education. So English language development is part of regular education.
Okay.
Of course, it's the financial scale.
It's financial scale,
Exactly.
yes, but
Exactly.
there's nothing
It's needed.
for, it's not like
No.
special ed state.
No.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And then it's kind of about like the pull-out hours type thing. So when they take the access test,
Yes.
is that that's during the school day, I would assume?
Yes.
And it's during class time, or is it during their regular scheduled pull-out time? Like, do they miss, is it? And
It
is
would
it
be
like
like
the MCAS, it's like the MCAS, like it's a full day thing, like type thing?
No. So the teachers schedule it in a certain way
Okay.
that when the students are best, right? For example, in the morning and not late in the afternoon, right? So they schedule it in a way and not more than 1 domain per day.
Okay.
So that it is during class time. Sometimes it'll be during the ELD instruction time, but this is state mandated. So
they
you
have
have
to
to
do it.
administer it and during the window that we're given to do it. So in some cases they are missing instruction, yes.
Okay. Yeah. It's too bad that they can't have it at a time that they're not missing things. I know my kids, when they have to miss a special or miss something, they get so like, well, why are we missing the fun stuff? Why, and
Well, it's very interesting. We cannot instruct during specials. So there's certain things that we have in place that we do follow. Yes.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time tonight and your thorough presentation.
You're welcome.
I'll add one comment, and that is, so Rhoda does an excellent job leading the department, but the department also consists of very talented, dedicated educators who work tirelessly on behalf of all students, and they really enrich our schools. So just a thank you to Rhoda and the ELD teachers. They do an amazing job, and we're very fortunate to have such high-quality faculty and staff working on behalf of children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's at every school, right? Every school has them. All right. No old business at this time. Superintendent report to the committee, enrollments.
So in your packet is the enrollment report as of January 12th, 2023. So our enrollment is 1,612 students. Typically, we see increased enrollment obviously in August, summer move-ins, and then December, January. So we did see 6 students move in December and January. But for the most part, our enrollment is stable and predictable at this point in time. And we continue to monitor enrollment for 23-24. But again, we're using the best data that we have at this time in terms of making projections. And we'll speak more about that during the budget presentation.
I feel like we have a new color here. Do we have new colors on the teachers? Do we have green? Has that always been like that?
Oops, where's mine?
I know we do yellow for the capped, but I'm seeing
so.
few on
So
green,
we
and
did
I'm
just
thinking
highlight.
like,
I think it's a change from the previous year, right?
So this enrollment report shifts educators to the next grade level. So
okay, so that's what it's shifting. That's why it's saying that they're like the floating teacher type thing. Okay.
So also in your packet is the FY23 monthly general fund expenditure report, and I'll turn it over to Becky.
So we are now more than halfway through fiscal year 2023, and the Northborough operational budget continues to hold steady. As of January 31st, the monthly general fund report does show that we have $307,700 and just about $29, or 1.15%. At the same time last year, we had $170,779, or 0.66%. So you can see that we are trending a little bit better at this point in time this year. Our watch areas remain the same, and those are substitutes, utilities, and also our special education transportation. And the finance team continues to work with our schools and with departments to make sure that they have the resources and the tools that they need and are able to purchase those. And I welcome any questions at this time.
None at this point. I might talk to you later about the budgeting and the budget, but I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the Northborough Public School District fiscal year 2023 budget monthly general fund expenditure report as of January 31st, 2023 until audited.
Second.
Motion by Erin, seconded by Lauren. All in favor? Unanimous. Forgot to ask if there was any discussion, but no discussion.
So also in your packet are the FY24 budget goals and FY24 budget calendar, and I will speak to in more detail about those two documents in the FY24 recommended budget presentation.
Great.
So this evening we'll be reviewing the FY24 recommended budget. It's hard to believe that it is February 1st, 2023. And this evening we'll present information, and then hopefully the school committee will make a decision around approving or not approving this recommended budget. So as we do with all of our presentations, the work that we do is really mission and vision centered and oriented. So our mission is quite simple but powerful. It's educate, inspire, and challenge all students, and I emphasize all. And then thinking about what type of student we want to help foster as they move to the next grade level, the next school, and eventually graduate from Algonquin Regional High School. So again, thinking about how do we create students who are collaborators, creative and critical thinkers, communicators, socially and civically engaged, growth-oriented, healthy, and balanced. So the budget process is a process, so it begins early on in the year. So it begins in September and includes input and feedback from a variety of stakeholders, from educators in the classroom to building principals, to the teaching and learning team, and the school committee. And where we are this evening is February 1st, presenting the recommended budget to the school committee. After this evening, we move into the months of March and April. So we'll hold a public hearing, we'll meet with appropriations, and also eventually present the budget to the legislative body, the town meeting members, for hopefully approval. And I just want to highlight two dates, upcoming dates. So we will be, and I'll add these to this calendar, but also we'll send out a reminder to the school committee members. We'll be meeting with financial planning on Thursday, February 9th, and then appropriations is scheduled for Wednesday, February 22nd. And again, I will communicate those dates in an email on the next day or two.
Are they daytime or evening?
Evening. So in terms of when we started the budget process, there were a lot of unknowns in terms of variables that would impact our FY24 budget. So as you can see, we do know that out-of-district special education funding, the tuition increase is 14%, that is known. We know that out-of-district special education transportation is also known at this point in time. We have factored in our increased energy costs. And lastly, the increased costs of supplies and materials and services as a result of inflation. What we still are unknown about is collective bargaining. So we are in negotiations with our Northborough Teachers Association, and that is in process, and hopefully we'll have a better sense of where we are in the next several weeks. So what I am presenting to you this evening, the budget is really a level services budget. It's really the same services that were provided in fiscal year 23, and we're continuing those in fiscal year 24. So the funding of this budget really covers the increased costs and salaries, costs of supplies, goods and services, and there are no new positions, programs, or services included in this budget I am presenting to you this evening. So I just wanted to spend some time revisiting the school committee approved budget goals. So obviously, in addition to our strategic plan Vision 2026, the school committee engages in a process of identifying what goals it would like to see accomplished in the upcoming fiscal year. And I just want to highlight these goals because I want to highlight which goals are achieved and which goals are still outstanding in this budget I'm presenting to you this evening. So I think, first of all, I think we are maintaining a high-quality staff in this budget, but we are not growing that staff. We are not adding new positions. Some of the positions that we advocated for, and it was a priority of the school committee, was adding math interventionist position at each elementary school. That is not achieved in the budget I am presenting to you this evening. Also, we talked about adding health educator positions at the elementary level. And again, that is not achieved in the budget I'm presenting. Reestablishing a 5th grade strings program, that is not also achieved. Creating a K through 8 maintenance and grounds position, that is not achieved. Adding a special education team chairperson for the elementary and middle school levels, that is not achieved. And then increasing instructional technology specialists and technology support and create a daily presence at all elementary and middle schools, that is not achieved. So although this is a level services budget, it also does not accomplish many of the budget goals that the committee and the district set out to accomplish. With that said, there are some things we are achieving. So we are funding the technology replacement cycle for students and staff. That is being achieved, but again, through ESSER 3 funds, so it's being achieved through grant funding. And maintaining and improving technology assets and infrastructure in classrooms. Again, that is being achieved, but through grant funding. The school committee also set out a goal to fund the fiscal year 24-29 through 29 fiscal capital plan and implement and expand safety and security measures within school buildings. So we are working closely with the town of Northborough to fund the major capital project, which is the Proctor roof. I will share that it will be important to have a presence at the Select Board's next meeting, which is February 13th, because we'll be making decisions around how it will use ARPA funds. And they also understand that it is the school committee's priority, and we are counting on the Select Board to fund the Proctor roof project through ARPA funds. We also just learned that the state released a safety and security grant, so we are hoping to accomplish some of the security measures we were hoping to implement through the appropriated budget through a grant. So Keith LaVoy is writing that grant, and we're confident that we'll be able to make some enhancements as a result. And then lastly, this budget does maintain outdoor learning spaces, but we are not creating new outdoor learning spaces. So in terms of meeting the needs of all learners, again, we are providing updated and evidence-based mathematics curriculum for middle school, but again, that is through grants. We are providing updated and evidence-based ELA curriculum for elementary schools. That will be grant funded. Dr. Reinhorn is in the process of writing a grant to fund the purchase of those materials. And lastly, supporting class size according to the school committee's class size policy. Currently with enrollment numbers, this budget does achieve that goal. And then we are supporting culturally responsive classroom practices. So Rhoda mentioned a lot of the work that we're doing with our ELD teachers, our ESL teachers, the curriculum that we're implementing in terms of math and ELA. Also, we're looking at that curriculum through the lens of linguistically diverse and culturally responsive materials that we're moving forward. So I think it's important to note that this is a level services budget, and many of the school committee's priorities and goals are not achieved with the budget I'm presenting this evening. So where we started in October with a 15.12% increase over fiscal year 23 to this evening, February 1st, we are presenting a level services budget of $20,001,227, or a 4.9% increase over fiscal year 23. The budget drivers. So what we tried to do in this table is capture the work that the leadership team did, principals and educators, around moving from preliminary to recommended. So you can see that our recommended budget drivers are out-of-district collaborative and tuitions. I will share the difference between the preliminary to the recommended is not that we have fewer needs or fewer students, but it's really looking at how we use circuit breaker to fund the out-of-district collaborative tuitions. Transportation and special education from preliminary to recommended. So Marie and the Student Support Services team, Becky and the finance team spent a lot of time thinking and projecting special education transportation costs. As a result, we were able to sharpen our pencil. So that number is at $154,852. And again, this is where the unknown still exists. We still could see increased transportation money coming into the district as a result of increased funding of the Student Opportunity Act. We have salary increases in COLAs. It was $1,100,000 to now $632,519. So again, having a much better idea of our steps and lanes and where people are moving, also retirements, and also a better frame of where we are in terms of the COLA for our negotiations. So that number currently is $632,519. The cost of electricity and heating has remained constant from preliminary to recommended, as well as substitutes, teachers, nurses, and leave of absences. We are still being impacted by the pandemic. Teachers are rightfully taking more time when they're not feeling well. They're staying home as we are asking them. But the unintended consequence of that is we are seeing increased costs to our substitute line items at this point in time. So the current budget drivers total $1,377,720. So budget reduction, so offsets. In terms of the recommended budget, does include a circuit breaker special education offset to tuition reimbursement of $1,350,309. We are seeing circuit breaker special education transportation reimbursement offset, and this is again where we could see a greater offset, which would only help us move forward. But right now it's $110,516. And then potential retirement leave of absences. So from the preliminary budget in October to today, that totals $221,189. And there's still the potential that we could learn of retirements between now and by the time the budget is actually brought forward at the town meeting. So we're keeping an eye on that. But right now, the budget reductions that we're seeing total $1,682,014. So we're also seeing some budget reductions from the preliminary revised to the recommended. So from that process, we are seeing budget reductions that total $2,726,937. And I think it's important to note that we are using facility rental revolving funds as a budget offset. We do take in facilities rental for Northborough Extended Day Program, as well as Northborough Youth Basketball, and we also receive a rental for the facilities, for those facilities uses that happen outside of our organization. So with that said, the budget that we are presenting this evening is a level services budget, which totals $28,001,227, which is a $1,308,274 increase over fiscal year 23, which represents a 4.9% increase over fiscal year 23. I also just want to highlight what are the budget drivers. I think that there are certain areas where we're seeing this $1,308,274. So salary increases. So we are a people organization. We are an HR organization. Our greatest asset are the teachers. So 46% of that budget increase is going to salaries. 11.3% of the budget increase is going to transportation special education. So we are just having increased costs of transporting students to point A to point B. It's not like we're getting something for that transportation, but it's a reality that we're facing in this fiscal year. Special education tuition. So again, we are seeing increased tuition costs of out-of-district special education. So that 14% is resulting in 28% of the budget increase that we're seeing. Utilities is about a 10% increase of the $1.3 million, and then substitutes is about a 5%. So this budget is not adding programming. It is not adding supplies and materials. I think it's really important to communicate to the community it is a level services budget, and the 4.9% is what we need to continue to provide the current level of services that we're providing in fiscal year 23. If any one of these increases from utilities to transportation, special education, that would be money that we would have had conversations around what type of program we would like to add to our organization. What type of experiences do we want kids to have in the classroom? Unfortunately, the current economic condition that we're in, with increased energy costs, this increased costs that are actually being shifted to us as an organization, aren't allowing us to have those types of thoughts and thinking in additions to the budget. So the impact of the 2024 proposed budget, or the recommended budget, is we are anticipating to reduce by 2 positions. So these are ESP positions, support specialists. The Student Support Services team and the finance team spent a lot of time looking at kids that we are welcoming into our program and exiting to the high school, and we're able to reduce by 2 positions as a result of just student needs. We are utilizing FY24 circuit breaker funds in this budget to offset the increased costs of out-of-district tuitions. And again, it may impact FY25 special education. This is also where we need to be strong advocates, that 75 to 90% circuit breaker reimbursement. So that is something that is a moving target. But at this point in time, it is something that we'll have to keep monitoring very closely. A lot of the growth areas in the purchasing and the curriculum materials were shifting to ESSER 3. We took a very conservative approach to expending ESSER 3. We did not expend it immediately when we received it. We had 2 years. We have to expend it by fiscal year end of 24. And I think the strategy that we employed has served us well, because we're able to take some of the potential impacts of the budget and shift it to ESSER 3. Utilization of IDEA special education grant for transportation. So we do receive grant money to support our special education. Part of that grant funding usually goes to positions. Some of the grant funding will go to support the increased cost of transportation. Utilization of facility rental revolving account. So again, we have used that money in the past if there has been an emergency. We still have money in that account, just to not to the extent we had in the past. And if there is an emergency that exceeds the amount we have in that account, we'll need to go to the town and ask for additional funding. Enrollment numbers are always subject to change and based on new students. So we are making informed decisions with the data we know. And part of the communication to John Kader and the select board will be, if we see an increased enrollment, we will be coming back to the town and asking for additional funding to support for additional educators to maintain the class sizes that our families and the school community expect. And lastly, the level services budget does not anticipate any unforeseen expenditures. This is not atypical from the budgets we present. We present budgets based on what we know, and then we try to respond to the unknowns. But again, what tends to be most unpredictable is special education costs. Students who may move into our district or who are in our district and require a different level of placement than we anticipated. And again, that would require us to go back to the town and ask for additional funding. I also want to highlight again, when we talked about school committee's budget priorities, there are a lot of positions that principals and district leaders requested that are not funded in this budget. There are 15.28 FTEs, totaling a little more than $1 million that were requested that did not make this budget. And I think it's just important to know this is a level services budget. And then in terms of what was moved off of the FY24 recommended budget and on to grants. So we did move purchasing ELD kindergarten curriculum. So that is on ESSER 2. So we have to expend that money. So this is a great use of ESSER 2, and it supports some of the work and presentation that Rhoda shared this evening. Moved to ESSER 3 is shifting some of the ELA coordinator salary to ESSER 3, and we're doing this both in Northborough and Southborough for 1 year. Purchasing middle school science curriculum, Envision math K through 5, the middle school math curriculum, and purchasing of student and staff devices. So what's not in the recommended budget and has been shifted on to ESSER 3 is $164,500. So not included in the budget, again, strings program, instrument lease, and materials. So we have not given up hope. We are looking at the current assets we have around educators to teach music and adding a strings program. So we're thinking outside the box to try to make this happen next year. So more information to follow. We have some ideas. I'm not ready to share this evening. But we've been in communication with the music department around what this could look like potentially. The ELA K through 5 curriculum and professional development. So this is not in the budget. However, Dr. Reinhorn and Megan Kelty are in the process of writing a grant through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We are confident that we will get the grant, but we don't have a definitive answer yet. That pays for half of this cost. The requirement of the grant also is that if we do get the grant and accept, we have to purchase the materials out of fiscal year 23. So if we get the grant, Becky and I are looking very closely at where we are in terms of financial position for the end of fiscal year 23, and we will be encumbering the difference so we can actually accept the grant, purchase those ELA curriculum materials. ST Math K through 5, so also writing another grant, Dr. Reinhorn and Kathy Lozot. So again, we have a good indication that we will get that money. And we're also looking at our entitlement grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV to fund this purchase. And then lastly, math screening and diagnostic assessment, looking at Title II grant money specifically to fund that purchase. So again, what is not in the recommended budget, but we will be moving forward through grants, is a total of $224,575, which is approximately 1% of our overall budget. And then lastly, just a historical view of our budget increases since FY18. I think the school committee in the district has brought in budgets that are very fiscally responsible. As you can see in FY21 and FY22, as a response to the pandemic and not really knowing what the financial climate would look like and landscape would look like, we partnered with the town. And this year, what is needed to bring forth a level services budget is a 4.9% budget increase. And this does not include many of the hopes and dreams that the school committee, principals, district leaders were hoping to achieve in this budget. So, with that said, I will conclude my presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much. I feel like we've heard this all before.
And I apologize for going through it all over again, but for
No.
the community, I thought it was important.
That's what I was going to say. We've heard it all before, but yet it still seems new, and things change, as we all know, rapidly. So even though it was extensive and somewhat, some parts repeated. It was all new and worthwhile, the full presentation, so thank you so much. I do have some questions, but I will pass it down.
Yeah, or I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
Erin, right now?
I guess the only thing I don't know if you can expand on a little bit is, it's no surprise, I have a really hard time passing a budget that reduces positions, especially the ones that are on the ground doing the work. So I know there are some open or unfilled ESP positions. Would those just unfilled positions just be eliminated? Is that
so
the idea?
I can share with you historically what has happened. So again, it's based on student need, so it's not like we're reducing a position that a student needs. We have a lot of attrition through our ESP positions. Either they move on to take on teaching positions, or they decide to go work in another profession or another district. And through that attrition, we try to retain the current employees. So I do not anticipate that this will impact the people we currently have employed as ESPs, that there are more than enough open positions, and through attrition this summer, I'm confident that no one will be impacted.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you
Yeah, I
concur?
completely agree with that statement.
Okay.
So can I ask a follow-up to that then, before you
Yes.
move on? So I would just want to make sure that our students then had the ESP support they needed in the classroom.
Correct.
And that would be maintained as
So
best as possible.
we have some students who are aging to the high school, aging up to the
Okay.
high school, and as a result, and who are no longer needing.
That's what you mean by
shift.
attrition? Is that what you, okay. Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, keep going.
That's it. You can go ahead.
Great, thank you. So, same as Kelly said, it was nice to hear the full presentation again, even though I think that we're all pretty well versed in it by now. So thank you. Music, you know I was going to talk about music. Rhoda, where are you? You need to get behind me. Oh, there you are. Perfect. So I hope that, the proposal in the works hopefully does come to fruition, and that if more is needed for future years, that we could hopefully work that into the following budget. I don't know if I really have anything new to say. I think that we all knew what presentation was coming tonight. We were all pretty well versed in it. But I think what is impactful to see is our budget goals and what we were able to achieve and what we were not able to achieve. I'm grateful for that visual, so thank you for that.
There was a lot of red.
There's a lot of red. And we were anticipating that after our discussions these many, many months. So that will make our work easy next year. We just, have the same budget goals next year. But we do have a lot of work to do, so I'm really hoping that the budget landscape for next fiscal year is a little bit better.
We hope so.
Yeah,
So,
trust me.
yes. I hope that Becky can get some sleep soon. But it is. It's, I think you feel the energy in the room. We're all sort of let down, but we also realize that it's a very challenging economic time. And to know that we have a level services budget, but that our level services are pretty good and provides a pretty high level of services, I think, is making me feel okay with this budget. Not great, but okay. So those are my comments.
So, a few things. So, we theoretically approve this budget tonight, and then come later down in time, we get great state funding. It goes from the 70 to 90. We get more for this, more for that. The number that we approved tonight, does that mean that we could then potentially get some of those other things?
Yeah, so I think that, let's say there is an unanticipated retirement that we learn of, and we get additional circuit breaker money, and the town gets an increased level of state aid for education. Those all could be opportunities to have more conversations and revote the budget.
Okay. So,
Would you lower that 4.9, or we would use that money to bring forth some goals?
So we would most likely maintain that 4.9%, but because of those increased revenue, circuit breaker,
we can use the 4.9 differently.
retirement,
Yeah,
we might be able to have a conversation around, what could we add to that?
some of our goals.
Correct.
Okay.
The hope is not lost.
That's good. I like to hear that.
Yes.
So that's kind of like the retirements thing. So the retirements here, it looks like it almost like tripled. So that was basically like we expected one person to retire, but we ended up having like 3 or 4 type things. Right?
It was retirements and then leaves of absences.
And then leaves
Yes.
of absence.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we're pushing the ELA salary on the ESSER, the 35,000
Just a portion.
for the 1 year. What's going to happen for fiscal year 25? We're going to be able to,
Yes.
okay, because of the other things that are happening.
So,
Okay.
so part of the requirement of ESSER 3 is to ensure that funds are expended, a certain portion are expended around levels. So the work that Megan does and the ELA curriculum, we felt was a good use of that money
Okay.
versus trying to add another staff member or another set of resources to that.
Okay, great. Last chance, Bryce?
Can I just make one comment too?
Yeah.
So adding on to Lauren's comment that, and I think we've talked about this a lot, that a level services budget, although we had goals to add some programming and interventionists, which are very important as we move forward, we do have, our level services is a high level of services for students. You can make improvements to an organization without necessarily adding money. There's a lot of room for growth and improvement and efficiencies to enhance that student experience in the classroom that isn't necessarily represented via a dollar. So we take that approach as a district that we're always looking for ways we can do our work better to support student experience, and we will continue to do that with this budget.
Okay. Grace, you good? All right, so I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 recommended budget of $28,001,227, which is a 4.9% increase.
So moved.
Second.
Motioned by Lauren, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for all your hard work, for your whole team, for the district's whole team. It takes a lot to do a budget. Your hours are not unnoted.
Yeah, we are fortunate to have an exceptional finance team, a leadership team, and I think, Becky has had a lot of sleepless nights, and it's been a lot of great work. But we're very fortunate to have Becky as our Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
So just one last comment too, we will update all of our budget booklets as a result of tonight's vote to reflect the line item budget, the impact this budget has on staffing. So we'll have that prepared hopefully by early next week.
Okay. And then, so is the idea then, now do we do the
Public hearing.
The public hearing would be for March?
March
or-
1st.
Yes.
Okay. All right, school committee members' reports. Anything personal? Erin?
The Wellness Committee met today, or the Subcommittee for Wellness Week. So we're planning a Wellness Week throughout the district and with the 2 towns for the first week in May. Some more information to come from that.
A wellness week. Are they going to do that thing that they did last year at the last day of school? That was a...
Oh, yes.
Yes, they are.
Oh,
That's a different, that's the Be Well.
That's the Be Well thing, but when you said the event thing, that was
Made
so
an
fun.
impact on me.
It made such an
I
impact on me.
already took the day off.
And I loved it on the last day of school too, like that half day. I thought it was like a great timing and
Yes,
stuff.
I've heard that's in the works.
Yeah.
Be Well Northborough Carnival.
Yes.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be
This
so
is
great.
the first week of May throughout the district, and I think the library is going to do some events and things like that.
Fun. Great. Laura?
So the policy joint subcommittees met. Erin was there.
That was not memorable.
I'll let you report on that.
We'll probably do the majority of our reporting in March during our combined meeting, but we did review quite a few policies for a second review, as well as some new policies as well. So continuing our focus on health and wellness of our students. So revisiting that wellness policy that we've been looking at and talking about some other ones like concussion policy, the Narcan policy, animals in schools, health and sexual education. So stay tuned for more during our combined meeting in March.
Awesome. Great, thank you. And I would like to report on the NSPAC. They are doing their first annual mini golf fundraiser. And it's happening this Friday night from 4:30 to 6:30, and it's at Trombetta's in Marlborough. And on their website, you can register ahead of time, and it's $10 per golfer. And you can register that. They're going to have 50/50 raffles. There's pizza, drinks, all that fun stuff. If you cannot, you can also pay at the door. If you cannot go, but you do want to contribute to them, you can donate online. And there is on their newsletter, they send it out, but it's also on their page, and you can make a donation online directly to them for that. So I have a schedule conflict. I'm going to try to avoid it, but if I can't, then I am going to be making my donation for them. So, I think that's about it for right now.
So I just have one update, and that is the Coalition for Equity formed a calendar study group.
Oh yeah, I was at that.
So the calendar study group has had 2 meetings thus far to look at the 23-24 academic calendar. The goal is to make recommendations to the committee as it considers a 23-24 student calendar. We have one more meeting, which is tomorrow. I think the study group has done some really great work, has had many great conversations, and I think will provide some recommendations and guidance that will help the committees consider as the committees make a decision on the calendar.
The other thing I've heard is the school configuration. So we met, and we've decided that we are going to push through with the Peasleys, MSBA's feasibility study? Statement of interest for them. And so by doing that, once the statement of interest, if it gets approved, they're having an April meeting, and if we get invited into the program and stuff, during that, there'll be a feasibility study. They'll have to investigate the town, the schools, like all that kind of stuff. So we're thinking that the configuration would play a part into that as well. So we're pausing the configuration study group until we find out about what's going to happen with that. And the long plan out would be, again, fiscal year, I think we said like 28 or 30.
is when
Yeah, so
sorry.
Yes, that's when the
study.
no.
so
That's when
That's
the
when the-
construction and the renovations of Peaslee would occur.
Oh, that's actually I'm
my-
faster. I didn't actually hadn't thought I was.
So my recommendation
Would be
is
like
next agenda topics. We had the grade configuration study
Yeah.
update, and we also talk about MSBA
Yeah.
and the statement of interest for Peaslee and how those two
Okay.
connect. But you're right, we did have a good meeting.
Yeah, it was good.
It was helpful.
Right
Well, I
here,
like-
actually.
I like the idea of allowing that process to begin with one school and identify potential long-term outcomes for the community of K through 5.
Yes. All right, so unless there's any other updates, I don't think so for that. No educational policy at this time, but sounds like from Lauren that there will be in our combined meeting in March. Policy development distribution, none at this time. Personnel items distribution of personnel report.
So in your packet is the personnel report as of February 1st, and I'll just highlight leave of absences. So this is just one example of Lynn Oswell, who will be taking a leave of absence in the 23-24 school year. So this is an example of information that we didn't have as we were looking from the budget process that we gained and impacted the overall budget.
Okay, so my question about that, for example, so it would be a gain because do they not need to replace that position because of the numbers of the students?
So it's
or
the
is it because
differential
it's a
between-
different level of
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then my other question is about Kara, who I know her leave was last year.
Correct. So
And then she's at Proctor for librarian.
Correct. So
Love her.
So
it's
we granted her another.
1 more year
Correct.
to stay and see how it goes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I just want to say welcome to the new appointments.
Yes, ESPs were very.
ESPs, I see the two ESPs. I actually know one of those ESPs. I talked with her on her first day of work, and she said she loved it. It was great. She had a great time, so.
And if you know of people who may be interested in becoming an ESP, send them our way.
Great. All right, communications, none at this time. Action on minutes, we have the open meeting minutes that is in our packets from January 4th, and then the executive session meetings that was emailed the link for our review. Do we have any motions? The executive meeting minutes would be retained.
So you need a motion on.
We need a motion on the minutes for
So I'm
approving and accepting the January 24th, and then executive session approving and retaining.
So before motion, I do have just a comment.
Yep.
The January 4th minutes, there's one tiny thing. I think that it was, like, I was credited for talking about the wellness committee. I haven't been able to make the meetings. It was really Erin. Erin was at that meeting, and she reported out. So that was the only thing that I noticed.
So we'll amend.
Sure. We'll amend that. Okay. Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard when they're playing back, and if the
Right.
cameras aren't directly on us and can't see us with our
Who is
cameras
talking
talking, it's hard
behind
to
our
sometimes.
screens.
Yeah, I know, it's hard. It's definitely hard. The ladies who've been doing it is it Nancy who does it? Who is that?
So Eileen Dawson.
Eileen, and
has been doing
has been doing
it for us,
it for a while. She does a great job. Thank you.
Yes.
It's a thankless task.
It is, but we appreciate it.
Make a motion?
So I make a motion to approve the open meeting minutes of January 4th, 2023, with the amendment of Lauren as reporting out on the Wellness Committee to Erin as reporting out on the Wellness Committee.
Second.
Motion by Bryce, seconded by Lauren. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
I can make a motion to approve and retain the executive session minutes of January 4th, 2023.
Second?
Motion by Aaron, seconded by Lauren. Any discussion? Roll call, I believe. Does it have to be roll call? Oh, no, that's just, I think it's just,
Just to
yeah.
go into executive
That's a
session.
go in, which we will be doing later. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Future agenda items. We've got our teaching and learning presentations, music, science, math, ELA, SEL screenings, warrant articles. We got to figure about that, decide on who's to do that. Approval of field trips.
Yes.
So if there's, it was brought to some of our attention that when the field trips have to be an overnight or they're long things, they have to be approved by the school committee 30 days prior to their thing. I guess in previous years, we've approved of it for future years, like next year they're going to go, but because of COVID and things, I don't
Got
believe.
away from it.
Yeah, I don't believe we did that, and I think it was kind of an unknown. So there is one coming up in May, so we'll go ahead and work on that for next month. And then you mentioned about a presentation or discussion for the MSBA
The grade configuration.
and the grade configuration.
MSBA.
Anything else?
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
Does March start the PTO presentations
I
too?
believe so. I was going to.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
I will
Yeah, we need to send
Send
out.
out that
look at
thing.
that schedule.
I think ours.
Is it? I feel like there was two. I feel like it was 2 to
One.
1, but we'll. Yeah, I have that. That's
Okay.
We'll move on. All right.
So March is Peasley PTO.
Just Peasley.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. You know what to do.
April is Z and NEF. And then May is Malacan and Lincoln. And where's Proctor?
I think Proctor was
It's with
March.
It's with Peasley.
Yes,
I
you're
feel
right.
like, yeah, I feel like that's what I was, Peasley and Proctor, I think, is next.
Yeah. So I'll start that.
Yeah, I'll talk to,
That's
it's okay, it will be your last one.
yes.
Approval of bills and payrolls are done online. We are up to date.
Yes.
Audience sharing. Yeah, we're good? All right. Thank you so much. Then, since there is nothing else on our agenda and nothing else that needs to be discussed, I need a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss the strategies with respect to collective bargaining, the Northborough Teachers Association, Unit A. And due to my determination, the discussion regarding this matter in open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the positions of the committee, and there will be no intent to return to the open meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Lauren and seconded by Bryce. This is a roll call vote. Or any discussion? No? Okay, roll call vote. Bryce?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. We are adjourned at 8:05. The open meeting has ended, or 8:55. And I'm wondering, did I say 6:30 or 6:02 when I started tonight? Anyways,
I don't know how
it was
I know
6:30.
that.
Okay, I did. Okay, I just had a mental thing that I didn't say it. So it's 8:55, and we will go to executive session. Thank you so